boundaries saved my life. And as a recovering people pleaser, someone who spent a lot of time making other people feel comfortable at the expense of myself, um, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about, why it might be that setting boundaries can be really difficult, um, what you will get out of doing it, and hopefully you can see the positives rather than the negatives, so that if you are in a position where you're struggling to set a boundary or you're struggling to stand up for yourself, maybe this will help you, because I totally understand where you're coming from. I spent a lot of time worrying about what other people think, if I'm disappointing someone, feeling guilty for setting a boundary or walking away from a situation that wasn't conducive to my growth. And so today I just want to talk about that. So, first and foremost, I hope you're doing well. Um, I think that sometimes, life can move so quickly, and not everyone can, keep up with the rate that things move at. And so if you're feeling that way, I get it. That's how I feel every day of my life. But one thing that's really helped me is setting boundaries and taking time for myself. And you know, it's hard. It can be hard to set boundaries, I think, because when we set boundaries, we are doing something purely for ourselves. We are choosing to take action, to check in with ourselves, and just be in an environment that doesn't make us feel any type of way, Like, if we don't want to be around someone, it's typically because we don't enjoy what they have to say or their behavior or their energy. And that's totally okay. I think setting boundaries is great. It's kind of like if someone texts you and you don't really like the person, you don't have to answer, and that's okay. And sometimes you don't answer. But setting boundaries is something that's hard to do because we constantly feel like we're indebted to people, especially very important people in our lives. We constantly feel like we have to show up for people, and we have to show up at 100% sometimes. And that's just not realistic. It's just not possible. There's days that we need to recharge. There's days that we need to check in with ourselves, and we need to engage in activities that promote self-love and self-development. And I think what can happen is that when you set a boundary, it can be received negatively by certain people. And to describe this, I want to quote, I don't know who said this, but there's this beautiful quote that I read today, and it was, "The only people who get upset at you setting boundaries are the people who benefited from you not having any." So people who have some kind of reaction towards you saying, "Hey, I'm going to step away from this," or "I need some time," or "I need some space," people who have a reaction of anger, or, "How could you?" or they make you feel guilty, any of this. And I've experienced this before. I think it's very common. Um, how I look at that is that this person ultimately wants the version of me that makes them feel comfortable. They don't want the version of me that is 100% charged, that is taken care of on every level. They don't want the version of me that is most authentic and healthy and, growing. And I think that's where it can become dangerous, is a lot of times I've let people get to me in that sense, especially, and I made a short about this, especially if you're someone who's very laid back and who's very willing to help others, go out of your way. I remember I've done this my whole life, to going out of my way for people, even when it meant it was at a cost to me. And this was my own choice. I'm not saying, "Oh my gosh, I had to do all this stuff for other people." No, I'm always happy to do something. I'm always happy to help. But I think that there were definitely a lot of experiences where I wanted to say no. I wanted to say the big bad word. I wanted to say no. And I was the way that I was received, the way that that was received of like, I wasn't comfortable, it made me feel guilty for admitting that I had needs that were not being met, you know? And I truly think that when you express to someone that you have needs that are not being met and they disrespect that, like for example, you're setting a boundary, they say, "Well, how could you do this? What do you mean you're setting a boundary? What's wrong with you?" You know? It's it can be extremely damaging. It can be extremely damaging because you start to actually believe what they are saying, you know? And I think it's important to always be able to spot that behavior and then try to understand, okay, does this person genuinely know who I am? First of all, do they know my heart? Do they know who I am at my core? And number two, do they want what's best for me, or do they want the version of me that's best for them? You know? Because oftentimes, if someone is constantly overstepping your boundaries, I'm not talking about once, you know, people can make mistakes. But if it's a pathological thing, if it's a chronic thing of, I've set boundaries with you 5 times and you're still kicking down that door, it's completely disrespectful. And for me, like the amount of frustration that I've carried with people in my life who have disrespected my boundaries again and again, it truly gets to a point where the only thing you can do is just remove yourself from the situation. And I truly give this advice to anyone, especially people like me who it's hard to be like angry, like it's hard to like show anger or like raise your voice or anything. Really just removing yourself is okay. It is okay. And I think this can be a controversial topic of like, you know, you have to confront someone, you have to face them. And it's like, I truly believe that you don't have to do anything that you don't want to. There are going to be a lot of things that make you uncomfortable, but I think that if something genuinely makes you feel like crap, then just remove yourself, you know, or at least remove yourself temporarily so that you can recollect, so that you can process what just happened and then make a decision, you know? And always, always, you know, like remember the patterns of like how that person treated you. Like, is this the first time that they've overstepped your boundaries? Is this just a, you know, once in a while like that, you know? So just keeping track of that, because I think that the pros that come with setting boundaries, like learning to really do it, far outweigh the cons. You know, I don't actually think there are any cons. I just think those are labels that we attribute. But I think that when you start to set boundaries and you see like, oh my gosh, I have so much more time for myself. And suddenly I actually made a new friend who makes me feel really good and who's teaching me like really cool things and who's inspiring me. Or, you know, I don't feel guilty anymore. I don't feel guilty for not going to something that I was invited to because I'm not communicating with this person anymore who, you know, makes me feel guilty for not going. And just seeing the change, seeing the positive change that happened in your life and focusing on that after you've set a boundary will really help you to do it again and practice it. And I really think that that's the key. Practicing setting boundaries, practicing saying no. Like literally sit in front of your mirror and just say no, no, no. You know, like at yoga, we will do like a rag doll, and then the teacher will be like, okay, shake your head no, nod your head yes. And whenever like they say that, I'm like, you know, I'm aggressively shaking no, and I'm like in my mind thinking this is me like rebelling, like this is me being like, no, you're not crossing my boundaries, you know? And yeah, I think it's important. It's important. And if you're a recovering people pleaser, it's even more important that you practice this skill because, you know, you've probably had a lot of experiences where you try to say no. You know, you try to say no and you were probably received very negatively. Someone probably told you that you were being selfish or that you were overreacting, and they probably overstepped your boundaries again and again. And that's not fair. And I understand how frustrating that can be. I understand how enraging that can be. But I really think the best thing to do is, if you are angry, if you are frustrated, get it out, you know, do an activity that helps you get that out, but then really just learn to like set those boundaries and just cut those people out of your life, you know? Like, genuinely, I'm not even kidding. Don't feel guilty for cutting people out of your life who are making you feel like you are screaming at them to give you the space that you are 110% entitled to, you know? It's not to sound harsh, you know? This is something that took me 23 years to really implement with certain people in my life, that I've literally been, you know, saying the same thing over and over again of what I need. But some people will never listen to what you need, you know? They will never listen because they just want you to behave in a way that is conducive to them feeling comfortable in your presence, you know? Especially if you are someone who is very positive and optimistic, who has big goals and who just brightens up a room, you know? Like, not everybody is comfortable with the idea of someone who has high agency, or with the idea of someone who knows themselves and is confident enough to say no. But when you do, when you start saying no, I promise you it's going to get easier. And I promise you that those people are going to start to realize that, damn, I can't mess with them anymore, you know? And so I wish you luck on this journey of recovery. If you are a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser, you got this. It's going to get easier from here. Trust me. It's always hard in the beginning. It is always hard in the beginning. But as you continue growing and as you continue being yourself and making an effort, you will kill it. You know, practice saying no. It's my favorite word right now. My favorite word. Okay, that's all, guys. If you haven't seen the last video, please check that one out and subscribe to the channel to keep up with me. Okay, bye.